Awesome. All right. Thanks everybody for joining today. We're here to chat about effective board and committee management with Microsoft 365. Myself, I'm Logan Guest. I'm our sales and marketing manager, so I get to work with lots of different clients as well as partners on these sorts of client portals and board portal projects. From a Teams meeting etiquette perspective, this is a normal Teams meeting. Chat is open throughout the webinar. If you have any questions, comments, feel free to chat. Peter's more than open about having a dialogue back and forth. If you don't mind, please stay on mute. If you'd like to join the conversation, go ahead and ask on chat and we can invite you in. And the most important part is welcome, enjoy, and make sure to learn something. From a quick company background perspective, we've been very focused on these sorts of different portal builds. Typically client, vendor, volunteer portal builds, and more specifically, recently we've really focused in on the board and committee story. So we've got a suite of products that aligns really well with where Microsoft 365 has gone from a external user management perspective, and often in board scenarios, those tend to be external users. So we're excited to share our solution with you. From a customer perspective, we're very fortunate to work in all different industries. We have customers around the globe and continuing to grow on that side. So I'll hand it over to Peter for intro and the remainder of the presentation. Thank you.
Thanks, Logan. Peter Carson here, President of Extranet User Manager, also Office Apps and Services, Microsoft MVP. Contact info is here. We are going to be sharing a copy of the deck as well as the recording for the presentation, so you'll have both Logan and my contact information going forward from there. So let's start with a quick agenda. We've done the introductions. We'll start with a sort of a background of board and committee management challenges, what we see in common scenarios there, talk about how we can leverage Microsoft 365 for that, go through our solution, and we've got a couple of customer scenarios, one being Electricity Canada and the other being Municipal Benchmarking Network Canada, that we're going to use as actual customer case studies as we go through this. As Logan mentioned, feel free to ask questions. Logan and others from the Extranet User Manager team are on the call here watching the chat, so they'll do their best to answer questions. If it makes sense to jump in at that point in the presentation, I'm happy to diverge and address things as we go through there. I'll try and hold a little bit of time at the end as well. This is a new session for me, so we'll have to see how the timing goes, but I think we'll be okay from a time point of view. So let's start just background on boards and committees. They can take up all sorts of different shapes and sizes, and as Logan mentioned, typically there are users who are external to the organization on the boards and committees, and often when people think of say a board of directors, they think, well, they've got 12 to 24 people who are the board. That's a fairly manageable number from that point of view. But we often see, as we get into organizations, particularly with associations and not-for-profits and such, they often have a much richer, deeper structure of councils and committees and panels and such that can number into the tens or hundreds of committees and thousands of users through there. So that can become a real challenge in terms of how do you manage all those people and onboard them and get them into the right place from that point of view. There's lots of meetings happening across those different councils and committees that have packages that need to be put together and delivered out to them. I think for the most part, gone are the days of physical binders when we first started working with board portals back in sort of the mid 2000s, as not even Microsoft 365, but SharePoint on premises was around. There was a push to say, hey, we got to get rid of these physical binders and put it online. I think that ship has pretty much sailed, but there's still a lot of challenges around how you get those packages out. Are you sending them through email? Is there some sort of web portal? Do we need a mobile app as part of that? So that's sort of a good segue into what are common challenges that we see from a board and committee perspective. And first and foremost, I mean, the members of your board and your committees are likely going to have a pretty wide variety of technical abilities, and some folks may not be that tech savvy and can be resistant to technology, and you got to really keep it simple and make sure it's easy for everybody to get in and work with that. Not to be politically incorrect, but often when you get into senior boards, it's maybe retired folks that really haven't used technology as part of their working world, and making sure that those people can onboard and get in and do the things they need to do easily with a minimum of hurdles is one of the big challenges around there. the actual package creation process. You've got potentially lots of different documents that come together. Some organizations will put a package of documents together that might include, PDFs, Word documents, Excels, things like that. Others, build a more formal package where they create say a single large PDF that has everything in it from that point of view. What we're going to be talking about today is less about the package creation. It's more about how do you onboard the board and committee members and make those packages available to them in whatever format they may be. Email, unfortunately, is still a preferred method for a lot of folks. Is just send an email to the group and attach the documents to that. They're not ideal. We've got a lot of issues with that. I often use the phrase, if you're familiar with SharePoint, you've probably heard of a single version of the truth. Have a link in an email that goes to, say, a SharePoint library or a Teams channel that has the documents in it, and that way everybody's looking at the same up-to-date copy from there. But how do we make that simple is really the challenge here, because your members may not be familiar with Microsoft 365, and they could find it overwhelming. Microsoft has an awesome, very all-encompassing suite in Microsoft 365, but that can be overwhelming for people. There's just so many choices and so many options there. People get lost and just give up. So how do we make that simpler? And post-meeting, there's always meeting minutes and decisions and recordings that need to get shared out as part of that as well. So as we're working with organizations, we've got a bunch of questions that we like to ask. This is sort of just a quick sample of the, obviously what is the board or committee structure and how many members are there across all those various different committees. Typically the users are a mix of internal and external, but there may be scenarios where it's all internal or it's all primarily external. Obviously what's their comfort level with technology, that's sometimes hard to assess, but typically the board secretaries or the council chairs have a sense of their members and what their sort of technology comfort is as part of that. Are they licensed for Microsoft 365? Not a deal breaker. In fact, what we're going to be talking about here is using what's called the guest licensing in Microsoft 365. So everything we're going to be sharing doesn't require a board or committee member to be licensed themselves for Microsoft 365. But it's important to know some boards have been set up where they actually create internal accounts for the external users. Personally, I find that confusing because now they've got another set of credentials they need to remember, and it just complicates things further. So the guest member features in Microsoft 365 are actually a much easier way to manage that. Where are your board members' details stored? Are they published? Is there a public record of the committee members and such? And how do you publish that out to your public website or other members around there? How do you assemble your package? What's the process around that? Is there approvals and such? And then ultimately, how do you share that out currently with your members and how do they access those documents? Do they expire after some period of time? Is there sensitivity that we need to be aware of? Security issues, obviously, different boards, different committees have different levels of privacy and security that need to be respected as part of that. And part of the advantage of Microsoft 365 is you're built on top of the Microsoft stack. We have Azure Active Directory, which is the authentication process that people sign in for. You can build that really robust. You can put in things like multi-factor authentication to say, hey, people need to go through an app like the Microsoft Authenticator on their phone to get in as a second factor. You got to balance that and understand the sensitivity and whether that's needed or not, because the more steps you put in place, the more difficult it is for people. So there's always a sort of a pro and con between security and user experience. Okay, so let's dive into the Microsoft 365. What are the elements of 365 that we're going to be talking about today and leveraging as part of a portal for committees, councils, boards? We're actually going to be using our product, Extranet User Manager, as sort of the glue that ties it all together. And a lot of the reason for that is back to my earlier comment of just keeping it simple. There's so many things that you can do in Microsoft 365, in Teams, in SharePoint, that can be overwhelming for people. So a big goal of our Extranet User Manager portal is to simplify that user experience. Just make it really easy for people to do the things they need to do and get rid of all the other noise and keep it very simple from that perspective. Just like today's session, though, Teams is a great platform for doing online meetings. So running your board meetings through Teams. I think we're in a world now where 100% physical face-to-face meetings are probably a bygone. They're either going to be virtual or they're going to be hybrid. That's just the reality of, I don't know, can I say post-COVID world, or we ended the endemic rather than the pandemic? It's hard to say. And SharePoint is the repository underneath Teams. So if you do any sort of document management through Teams, you're actually using SharePoint as the repository for that. So that's a key part of where the meeting package goes, where the recordings go, the agendas, everything related to that from a document point of view. And we're going to be using Exchange from a calendar management point of view. We want to invite people to the meeting. Microsoft tools themselves, or they're using their own Gmail account or some other platform, doesn't really matter. But having an invitation that has links to all the documents, that has links to the online meeting, and again, just makes it simple for people to find the meeting, join the meeting, and understand what the meeting's about. We're going to talk about Power BI, which is another component of Microsoft 365 for things like committee reports. It could also be leveraged for part of the agenda for the meetings itself as well. If there's data that you want to be sharing out to the board, to the committee for them to review and analyze, Power BI is a great tool for that because it's not just static reports. It's the ability to interact with visualizations and do your own what-if scenarios as part of that. One of the challenges in the past with Power BI is that it requires user licensing, so you would have to license each of your committee members. We've added support to our EOM portal product. It's called a data portal extension that uses Power BI embedded and eliminates that licensing scenario. I've got a link later in the deck to a webinar we did earlier this year on that topic, so if you want to dive into that and have a look at that. Logan, if you were early on to the meeting, you would have heard Logan and I chatting, saying, yeah, Logan's going to hit record on the meeting. So we are recording this session, and it's ultimately going to be stored in stream on SharePoint. But the problem is, for everybody that's joined into this meeting, same thing happens in the board meetings. Any external members of the meeting lose access to the chat and lose access to the recording as soon as they leave the meeting. So where do we put that? How do we make that accessible as part of this as well? And then Microsoft Planner is a task management tool. You can build what's called a planner board for, not to confuse the name board, sort of a task ban board for the board or for the committee, and assign tasks and manage things through there. So those are sort of the elements of Microsoft 365 that we see playing in through here. What I'd like to do now, though, is jump right into a customer case study and give you a real example of what this looks like. So Electricity Canada is a client of ours. We've been working with them since last summer. We launched their new members portal early this year. We actually did a joint launch with a couple of other vendors of a training course and a learning management solution on that just last week. So it's an all-encompassing portal. It's not just for the councils and committees and the board. It's got a broader functionality for that, but we're going to zero in on specifically the board and council management of that. The key there, though, is that as a portal, it provides single sign-on to all the different applications. So whether you're coming into the Extranet site, which is this portal, the LMS courses, you're going into the data portal to actually look at Power BI reports and such, you're using the same credentials through that. So it's a single platform across that. It is a bilingual site as well, Canada being a bilingual country. And you can see there the links to their public website and to the portal itself. So that portal link is publicly available. You can have a look at it. I'll take you through that and give you a sense of what that looks like. But just a little more background on the organization. They're based out of Ottawa. They have more than 70 member organizations. So those represent power generation distribution companies like Ontario Power Generation or Toronto Hydro. And then corporate partners, which are larger organizations that work with those utility members. Oh, we've got some transition still in there. They've got more than 3,000 portal users and more than 50 committees. So there's a lot of people involved here, and there's a lot of process involved in terms of onboarding those. So we've provided the ability for users to self-register, and if they have a matching email domain to their organization, they're able to just auto approve in under that. There's a whole corporate directory that they can share their contact info with other members if they choose to. And then the committee membership is managed by the different committee owners at Electricity Canada. And that idea of delegation is an important piece of what we want to talk about here. the ability for the people that are closest, typically the owners of the councils and committees, to manage the content as well as the membership themselves. They don't have to go back to IT to assist with that management. So what I'd like to do here is, got a couple different browser profiles going, bear with me. Okay, so this is the live production portal.electricity.ca site. I'm at the English homepage here. I'm not currently signed in. Now, the portal is available to all members of the public. Anybody can sign in. This training course that we just launched, the Electricity Fundamentals in Canada, is available. There is a cost to it, so we've actually integrated Stripe payment processing as part of that allow you to register and pay and take that training course. When you go through the registration process, I'm just going to use a dummy email address here that's not currently registered on the portal. What we're doing is first identifying to say, are you already a member under that email address, or do I need to take you into the registration flow? And that particular email address I used doesn't have an account yet, so it's taking me into the registration flow. And it's looked at the email domain, this eom.co, which is one of our test email domains, and it says, hey, I don't recognize that as either a member or a corporate partner, so I'm going to take you down the public path, and I can fill in my information through here. Now, if I self-identify and say, well, no, I'm actually a member, and you can actually see all the member organizations through here. If I say, well, I work for BC Hydro and Power Authority, it's going to require an approval for that process because my email domain doesn't match BC Hydro's email domain. If it came in with the BC Hydro email domain, it would auto take me to member and auto select the organization for me. So again, to that simple idea, make it very simple to onboard people in through there. And I can choose my preferred language, whether I want English or French through here. And I can opt in as a member, not as a member of the public, but if I'm an actual member of one of the member organizations, I can say, yes, I want to display my information in the member directory and allow other members to find me. I can even optionally include my phone number if I want to provide full contact info as part of that. I can opt into their newsletter through that. So that's sort of the onboarding process, gets the people in there. And then the staff at Electricity Canada can then decide which of those people belong to which councils and committees and set up that membership from there. So I'm actually going to flip over to another browser here. This one I'm actually signed in as. I can't go too deep here from a privacy point of view, but I wanted to show you a few of the things that you see through here. So this is the members homepage. It allows me to drive into that directory and find other people that are members of the organization. I can sign up for the training. I can see their tweets, and I can see the committees that I belong to. So this user that I'm signed in now belongs to the Generation Council, and because this is kind of a test user, we have a test committee set up for that as well. I can see my data portals and such from there. And I can go into the member directory. Again, I can't go too deep through here, but I can see all the corporate partners. And if I was to click into any one of these, I would see the actual people from those corporate partners and have the same visibility on the member side as well as the corporate partner side. So it's a rich environment to connect together these thousands and thousands of different folks that belong to Electricity Canada. So to go deeper, what I'm going to do is switch gears now and go into our development portal, which I have here, and take you through a bit more on here. So I'd hope to have this up in our demo site. We're kind of down to the wire last night as we were still making a few changes for the webinar. So I'm actually going to use our we call it our dev integration, the place that we're working on the product. So hopefully everything hangs together for me. The team's been told to be hands off this morning until demo is done so we don't break things. But let me start actually out at the beginning here. So let me actually sign right out. Okay. So in the past, I've come in here, I've clicked the Remember Me, so I've got my email address all set in there. I'm going to use my development email address as part of that. We've got this concept of public groups that people can self-discover. Typically, the councils and committees and boards are not public groups because you don't want people to just discover and ask to join them. There's typically an invitation process as part of that. So I'll go ahead and sign in. Now, when I'm signing in, I don't have a password on this portal. I'm actually using Microsoft Azure AD to sign in. And because my browser was already signed in, I didn't even see the Microsoft login form as part of that. It's very simple. So I use my own credentials. I don't have a new set of credentials on the portal. And that's very important to us because that makes it simpler for people. If they don't have Microsoft 365 credentials, they go through what's called a one-time passcode. So they get emailed a passcode, they put in in that as their password. It's valid for 30 minutes and they're in from there. So either of those scenarios are very simple and the onboarding is very straightforward from there. So I can see all the groups that I belong to. I've got a number of different ones in this development tenant here. The one I want to focus on here, though, is the webinar committee. So this is a sample one that I created last night for the webinar, just to take us through the scenarios. So I can go ahead and view that group. And I come to the home page for the committee itself. So there's a number of different things going on this page here. There may be some documents. These are all dummy documents in this site here that are relevant to the committee as a whole. So they're not specific to any one meeting. You know, you may have governance documents and such that you're providing out to the committee. Basically, just drop them into SharePoint, and I'll show you the under the hood of how that works. And I may have archived documents that I want to provide access to as well. The meat of it, though, is really the meetings. So I've got, you know, upcoming and past meetings, and those can have details about the meeting itself and supporting documents as part of that. And I'm actually going to take you through the new meeting process and show you what that looks like. And then over here, I can see a contact for the committee itself, and I can see who the members are. We've only got a couple of myself and demo users in here right now, but you get a sense of how that works. And I'll actually show you inviting a new user in as part of that as well. So let's go through the process and say, hey, I want to actually set up a new meeting. Now, I only see this button if I'm a committee owner. So if I'm just a member of this committee, I don't have the rights to create a new meeting, but because I'm an owner, I can go through that process. And we can customize this to different implementations, but we feel this is a good starting point. So I'm going to call this one Creatively Webinar Demo. Let's pick a date and time for it. I'm going to put it in the future. Let's make it for May 9th. We'll start it at noon, and it'll be a just same day meeting. Let's say it's a 2-hour meeting going till 2 o'clock. Choose the meeting type. Is it an in-person meeting? Is it an online? Is it a hybrid? These days, most meetings I would imagine are going to be hybrid. I'm not actually sure where it's physically going to be, but normally you would put an address information in as part of that. And all this becomes part of the calendar invitation that goes out to the members on there. So let's go ahead and create that meeting. So what this is doing is it's calling a workflow in the back end, and it's doing a number of different steps to set this meeting up. Because as I mentioned, we want to keep things simple. That includes for the committee owner. We don't want them to have to do a bunch of different things to set up a meeting. They just come into the one place here, they fill out a form, your meeting's being created, and they can go ahead and close that. And we can see here, there's our webinar demo meeting that's in the upcoming list there. But there's a few steps still that I need to do here. So let's go have a look at things here. So if I go to my inbox, so I got a new email that just came in a minute ago on an approval request. So what we do is we create the meeting, but we don't invite all the committee members to the meeting yet, because there's a few more things that the meeting organizer probably should do before they're ready for that. The first and foremost is uploading the meeting documents. So what we've done is we've created what's called a document set in SharePoint. It's basically a folder with some metadata on it as a place to put your documents for the meeting. So let me get some demo documents going here. Bear with me one sec. I'm just on my other screen. Just while that's coming up, we can see all the meeting details on this document set in SharePoint as well. The meeting attendees are never going to see this view, but this is the place that I, as a meeting organizer, put together the meeting package. So here, let me just pull this across, see if I can get them sort of both on the screen so we can see them. I've just got a couple of random documents here. These are just sample documents. I can drag and drop them up into SharePoint. And you can see here it's uploading those 3 items. So it's populating the documents for the meeting. So if I come back to my email, it actually gives me a link to the meeting page. Now it's in the portal, but let's go through the process here with the email as well. So this is the actual detail page that the people that are going to be attending the meeting will see. So we've got the title, the date, the type of meeting, the link, and what happened under the hood is we actually created the Teams meeting invite. So it's all set up for an online meeting, ready to go as part of that. And those documents that I dragged and dropped in here are presented through here. And the key is that, yes, those are all in SharePoint behind the hood, but the meeting attendees don't need to worry about that. They can just come to this page here, very simple. It's got exactly what they need. They can just click on the documents to view them, and away they go from there. And actually, I've shown it through email, but we can set this up through Teams as well. So let me actually flip over to Teams for a second. Because if you remember, Microsoft Teams uses SharePoint as its underlying document repository. What I was showing you in SharePoint is the repository underneath a Microsoft Teams. So this whole thing that's been created for this team, or for this committee, is actually a team in Microsoft Teams. So there's our webinar committee team. We have a general tab here, and if I come into my files, I see the same view basically of what I see in SharePoint. And I can come into the meeting documents. And there's my webinar demo with all the dates and times and details on it. So all the same view that I had in SharePoint, I can live in Teams and do all my work here as well. You know, and I could drag and drop those documents up through this interface here, or use the upload. You know, like I said, Microsoft provides lots of different ways to do the same things. That causes confusion sometimes, but you can also choose your path and choose the tool and how you want to work as best from there. Okay, so we've got the meeting there. If I want to, I can go into the calendar and maybe tweak the calendar invite if there's some more details that I want to put in there. If not, and we're ready to go, let me come back to my inbox here. And you can see that this email that I've been working against is actually an approval request. It's saying, hey, your meeting's being created. You need to do these things. And once you've done that, then go ahead and approve it. So when I do that approval, what's happening behind the scenes in the workflow is it's now adding everybody who's a member of that committee to the meeting invite and sending that invite out. So in fact, if I come back to my Outlook here and I go over to my calendar, that was next week, right? Yeah. It's showing two here because I'm actually showing two different calendars, one for the group and one for myself. So if I turn this off, I'm just looking at me personally as a meeting here. And I've got all the same, you know, yes, I'll attend or no, just like any other calendar invite from there. If I come back to the group calendar view, you know, I can actually edit this meeting. I can see all the people in it, who's accepted, all the standard features through there. So I can see, you know, myself as the person signed in, a demo account, and this is actually my actual corporate account. So this meeting is in my regular calendar as well as part of there. And down here we can see the link to the meeting page in the portal that I was showing you, and the link here to join the meeting. We set up audio conferencing on this one as well, so I can dial in through a phone if I want. You know, basically everything's there and it's all set to go. And if I'd put the proper location in, it wouldn't have said TBD. It would actually give me the physical location as part of that as well. So a nice way to organize the whole meeting from that point of view. Okay. So how does this work behind the hood? What's underneath this? Well, let's take a minute and come back to the PowerPoint presentation. So if we look at the underlying architecture there's a committee site, and that might be a Microsoft SharePoint team site. It could be a Microsoft 365 group. It could be a Microsoft team. You know, there's a number of different ways to provision that out, and I'll talk a bit more about that in a minute. Oh, we still got our auto advance going on here. And it has a documents library with a number of different folders. So this is the structure that we saw under the hood on there. And we've got the document sets for the different meetings with their supporting documents as part of that. So the next few slides are just screenshots of what I just took you through. So if you want to look at the slide deck rather than the recording, you'll have shots of a bunch of that as part of that. But let's come back in here and talk about the other side of it from a committee owner perspective and what that looks like. So I've been showing you our EOM portal, which is the end user tool. Then we've got our EOM Admin. Now, admin is a bit of a misnomer because it is intended to be delegated out to the business owners themselves. So it's not just something for IT to use. It's basically anybody who owns or manages things through here. So if I come to the search groups here, I should be able to search up that webinar group. So there's our webinar committee. that represents that. And under the hood, it's a Microsoft team, which has an Azure Active Directory group as part of it. We can actually get right into the Azure portal if we want to and see the sort of technical details underneath that. Typically, you don't want to do that. What I want you to take from this, though, is this is the spot where the owner manages who's a member of the council and committee or the board. So if I come over to the users tab here, I can see those users, and those people are the same people that we see on the members list here. I don't have the ability in here to add and remove people. I need to come over here as a group owner, and I can simply hit the plus here and search out new people and add them through there. Now, there's a couple of things in terms of the way this particular group is set up. It's set up as an invitation-only group, so people can't discover this. You could say, you know what, let's make this a private registration. What that means is you can see that URL is pretty tough to guess. It's got a long letters and numbers on the end of it. You can copy that URL to your clipboard, paste it, chat it, text message it, whatever you want to somebody, and they can use that to join the group. Now we've turned the approvals on here, which means when somebody hits this and tries to join the group, I, as the owner, am going to get either a Teams message or an email saying, hey, somebody's requested to join your group. Do you approve them or not? You can go further. You can say, let's set up some auto approve, similar to what we did with Electricity Canada, to say, hey, if there's particular email domains that I just want people from those domains to go right into this group without an approval, you can set the auto approve on as part of that. And you can define what people see when they come to join. You know, probably best to be a little more verbose and explain what this group is about before you ask people to join it. We're going to leave that as a invitation only. I could also set it public, which means anybody could discover it and ask to join it. Typically, we don't see that in council and committee type scenarios. We also have the member page. So if you remember back here, this page here is what we call the member page. So I actually have the ability to author all the content that's on that page. This looks a little bit ugly. I actually use little, we call them HTML snippets, so you don't have to remember how to author up the particular format to show the documents or the upcoming meetings or such, because we don't want you to edit this page every time something changes. This is all dynamically driven. That, you know, you saw there when I created the webinar demo meeting, it just popped into this page, and we'll show you in a minute when we add a new member how they just show up in through there. So typically this is a template. The group owners don't edit this. It's the same across all the councils and committees. But let's go through the process of adding somebody brand new. Let's say I want to add somebody to this committee and they're not part of the portal yet. They don't have an account in there. So I would go ahead and just add a new user as part of that. I'm going to keep with the creative theme. Oh, yeah, split that across first and last name. And we'll just give them an email address. Now I want to make them a member of the group so that when I invite them in, they're already all set for that council and committee. So I can come into here and just start typing the name of my group. It'll pop up and say, hey, webinar committee, I want to add them to that. I could add them to a bunch of council and committees all at one time if I wanted to. The remaining fields you don't need to use. In fact, we can trim this down and make this much simpler. We leave all the fields turned on just in case people want to use them. So let me go ahead and save that. So what's happening now is the person's getting an account created as a guest in our tenant. They're being added to that group. And I didn't show you, but if I go back over onto the search groups here for a minute. We've turned on the group welcome email as well. So when people join this group, they get this email saying, hey, welcome to the webinar committee. You can access your committee site at this link here. And again, you can make that as rich as you want. You can put videos and images and hyperlinks and things in as part of that as well. And if I come over to my users tab now, you'll see my webinar demo 2 person is in there now too. In fact, if I come back to the portal and just refresh this page, we see our webinar demo 2 person in there as well. So now they're not going to be automatically added to the meetings that have already been scheduled, but any new meetings that I scheduled, they'll be included as part of that. So as a committee owner, I need to remember that and say, if I'm adding somebody new and there's pre-scheduled meetings, then I need to go to the calendar invites and add that person into those. I suppose we could enhance the workflow to add or remove people from existing upcoming. You know, the tools, the Logic App workflows that we're using under the hood are pretty sophisticated for that. Okay, what else did we want to do over here? Right, I want to talk a bit about the reporting side of things. So if I come back into EOM Admin, we've got another tab here called Reports. I mentioned that we just did a webinar earlier this year on data portal and the ability to embed Power BI reports into our portal product. The new release that's coming out later this month that this is running on here actually allows you to embed those reports into this EOM Admin interface as well. And one of the things that we want to do is with every deployment that we do of our product, provide this EOM Admin report as part of that. So I can pop that open. Takes a minute because I haven't looked at the report recently. It's actually starting up the Power BI service in the background. So we're only paying for it while it's running. Costs about $1 an hour to run it. And then it shuts down when nobody's using it from that point of view. So it really conserves your subscription costs with Microsoft as part of that. So this is a little small. We're planning on adding a full screen just to blow it up and make it a little easier to read here. But what this is showing me is all the groups and all the members in my tenant. In fact, this is going broader than Extranet User Manager. It's actually showing me non-EOM groups as well as EOM ones. If I filter down and say, hey, I'm just interested in the 25 groups that are the EOM groups, I can now see I've got 25 groups with 58 users across that. And most of those people are guests, but some of them are members in the tenant. And even some activity details of when did those people last log in through here. And I can come through my list here. Actually, I haven't refreshed it, so I don't have the webinar committee in here just yet. We've got an earlier committee one. I can actually click in on that and see the list of people that belong to that particular group. So you can see the interactivity with Power BI. You can click on lots of different things, and the other visualizations update as part of that. It makes it a very interactive experience through there. I want to see how my guests are coming in, so I can look in here and see, the dark blue is successful logins, the light blue is unsuccessful ones, and that's a challenge. We've got external people in here. They may not be comfortable with the Microsoft technology. How do we make sure that we know when people are having problems, what sort of problems they're having, and how do we mitigate that? We actually have a sign-in failures tab on here. This is more of an administrative function here to dig in and say, hey, what country are they coming from? Why was it failing? What applications were they trying to get to? This is all actually coming from the underlying Azure Active Directory. So we're using the Microsoft tools to collect all this. We're just providing a printy interface to render this up. I think what's more relevant to the committee owners is providing very specific reports to that use case. So this is one that we've done for Electricity Canada. All the email addresses are made up ones for privacy purposes, same with the names. The companies are the actual memory companies because that's part of the public domain. But you can see very quickly here, we've got 42 different councils and committees, and I can scroll through this and have a nice printed view of what my membership is across each of those committees. And I can page through those and review those. What we're planning on doing is actually providing a version of this report to the members themselves as well, that would show just their membership on the different committees, because they may want to know, hey, if I'm Ontario Power Generation, what councils and committees do staff from my organization belong to? And we can use what's called row level security to trim this report down and only show the data that they're allowed to see. So they wouldn't be able to see one of the other organizations' membership, but they'd be able to see their own. So we can get quite sophisticated in terms of who gets to see what through there. So ultimately, this is going to be embedded in both the EOM Admin and the data portal. We're just working out the details on that side there. So that's the main stuff on the demo side of the house. Let's come back to the deck here. So we've kind of gone through these different topics. If you tuned into previous webinar on the Power BI side, we actually really focused on the NBN Canada IT data warehouse. Now, we're not going to go too deep into this one today. It's very similar to the Electricity Canada scenario. So NBN Canada is a not-for-profit organization that collects data from its member municipalities, aggregates that, and then provides reporting back. Some of that data is reported publicly, so that you can actually go to the NBN Canada public website and compare municipalities' scores on different metrics. Some of the measures are just shared within the members, and some are just shared within the board that sits above on the NBN Canada side of things. So again, we use Power BI a lot to manage those visualizations. So there's 13 partner municipalities across 5 different provinces, and there's 700 different performance measures that they collect. So individual things like, there's a whole section on police services. So, crime rates per capita, dollars spent, IT has dollars spent, structure, lots and lots of different metrics that we're collecting through there. And there's over 1,000 users that are actually inputting that data. So there's a lot of people from each member municipality that's inputting that data. And if you want to check it out, I've got a link later in the deck to the session that we did on this one. Basically, we use Excel to collect all the data and then aggregate it and bring it together in Power BI from there. But the whole portal experience that I was showing you there on the Electricity Canada side applies to Municipal Benchmarking Network Canada as well. Sorry, it's actually 12 municipalities. I should fix up that other slide. So 1,000+ portal users across that. Those 700 measures that I was talking about are broken up into what we call expert panels, like IT versus IT versus police services or other panels. So individual municipalities have members on each of the expert panels, and they're responsible for the data entry. There's also separate standalone boards and committees as part of that as well. So the way the process works is that NBN Canada invites in what's called the Municipal Lead, so the sort of the primary point of contact within each of those 12 municipalities. The Municipal Leads have an Excel that they use to manage their members. So they add the people in and they define which expert panels and which boards and committees they sit on. Actually, yeah, we're just changing that because we actually want the board and committee membership to be managed by NBN Canada. So different folks responsible for different areas. This is an example we're actually delegating out to the municipalities themselves, and they get to manage who their members are as part of that. Timing wise, I'm kind of screaming along here. We're almost near the end. Logan, how have we been doing on questions that have been going through? Should I take a breather and talk to anything there?
We're doing good on questions so far, just more so around recording, and then actually a question surrounding pricing. And I had indicated there's a slide later on in the deck.
That's a good segue for the next couple of slides.
Yeah.
So I've mentioned the related events. So this is the Power BI dashboards one that we talked about. This primarily talks about the NBN Canada scenario. So if you didn't catch that one and you want to dig into it, both the slide deck and the recording are available on the link here for that. And then late last year, we did another one on engaging with external users at scale. It's really about the portal concept and the whole invitation process. I kind of breezed over the invitation only versus private versus public registration scenarios. We get much deeper into that in this seminar here. I'm going to actually change my order a little bit here. So let's come in and talk a bit more about the portal build phases. What does it look like to actually deploy one of these projects? So we like to do a planning process first. So let's understand what the requirements are, what's the structure of your board, your committees, your councils and such for there, and build out your information architecture. We have a starting point for that, but that may need some tweaking for your particular organization. So it is a solution that can be customized for your particular scenario. The build side, for the most part, is really just deploying out. There may be some custom registration. There's typically some custom branding because you want it to have your look and feel on the portal itself, and then setting up the groups around that. And then from a deployment point of view, deploying that out into your production tenant. I should mention everything that we're showing you here is intended to be deployed into your environments. We're not a true SaaS offering where we hold on to your data. It actually lives in your Microsoft 365 tenant, which we find helps a lot from a data privacy and data sovereignty point of view. You're not worried about what we're doing with your data because we're not doing anything with your data. We're just deploying our product into your tenant, and then your relationship is with Microsoft, just the same as all the other content that you would keep in Microsoft 365. So training and member onboarding is part of that as well. Actually, on the deployment and setting up the group side, I missed this. I didn't have it in my walkthrough step, so let me just go back quick. So if I go back into EOM Admin, it doesn't happen all that often, but you need a consistent process for setting up a new committee, particularly when you're first launching and creating. We went through this process with both Electricity Canada and NBN Canada, where they had dozens and dozens of committees that need to be set up. So you want that done consistently. You can do that through EOM Admin. You say, hey, I want to add a new group. And what we've got under the hood here is a number of different options as to how we create those groups. So we have an open source Teams provisioning solution that we've built over the years. We release versions on GitHub publicly and make it available to people. And we deployed it to lots of different clients there. It has the concept of creating a workspace template, which all these tools have as part of that. So we've got a starting point committee team template that creates a Microsoft team and the SharePoint site and sets up the information architecture structure that's needed in that team to support this solution. So that's one option is to deploy that and wire that in. We also work with two partners, one called Orchestry and the other called Valo. Orchestry is a Vancouver-based company whose specific thing is around automating and governance of Microsoft Teams and Microsoft 365. So they have workspace templates, so we can create a template with that of what a committee team should look like. And if you're already using Orchestry, we're actually working with them to wire the products together that you can create the request here. It feeds it over to Orchestry. Orchestry does all its magic. When it's done, it calls us back through what's called a webhook to let us do the last finishing bits to set it up in Extranet User Manager. And we're doing the same thing with Valo. Valo has a product called Valo Teamwork, very similar, competitive to Orchestry, that again has an idea of a workspace template and a process for creating those, and they both have approvals around that and such as part of that as well. So same idea, we can fire it to Valo Teamwork, let it do its work. When it's finished, come back to us, do our last bit to set it up in Extranet User Manager, and you have your new committee site ready to go from there. And the idea that even this process can be self-service as well. So if I'm a board secretary and I know I need to spin up a new committee, I can come in here, do the request through the template. Maybe IT wants to approve it. Maybe they trust that board secretary to say, just go and let it happen. That's something you can configure in all of these products as part of that. And it creates it in a very consistent, well-defined way so that it's not ad hoc in terms of how it's structured. And then it works very nicely with our solution, and away you go from there. So that becomes part of the setup and deployment process, is actually creating those committee teams. Now they may pre-exist. We had that with Electricity Canada, that a lot of their councils and committees, I think about half of them already had Microsoft Teams set up because people had sort of experimented with that before we built the portal. So we were able to take over those teams, turn them into Extranet User Manager groups, and manage them through this process. We had to sort of tidy up the structure and make it consistent, but we didn't have to blow them away and start over as part of that. So from a pricing point of view, we're very transparent with our pricing. You can come to our Extranet User Manager website, go to the pricing page on there, you'll see all these details in here. The way we price it out is the product is priced including up to 1,000 external guests. And the reason that number is fairly high is because there is a fair bit of effort, both from an installation and infrastructure point of view for the solution. So there is a certain level of scale that's expected to justify putting a solution like this in place. But that installation includes, some custom registration, some branding as part of that. If that gets more sophisticated, like the Electricity Canada example is all wired into their Salesforce and their MailChimp, so it's got a bunch of integrations. It's got that custom single sign-on for their training course, which is running on another platform. That obviously was a lot more than $7,000. We can talk with you and go through what that looks like. The annual subscription is for our product license cost. That includes support and quarterly check-ins from an upgrade point of view, from a, let's make sure you're best leveraging. So we actually include consulting time from our consulting team to work with you to make sure you're successful. And then this is an estimate of what typically costs to host the solution in Microsoft Azure. And as I mentioned, we recommend that clients use their own Azure subscription for that. So it's all within their tenant as part of that. So that is an estimate. That's costs that you pay to Microsoft, not to us as part of that. But feel free to dive in here. There's more details around that and what that looks like. Okay. So from a next steps point of view, As Logan mentioned, we're going to be posting up the presentation slides and the recording tomorrow, so you'll be able to get that. You'll get a follow-up email that includes a link to a Microsoft Forms poll. So, really appreciate it if you can give us feedback on that. That really helps us with future webinars and how we're doing from that point of view. We would like to know, what you'd like to learn more about. We've tried to keep the technical fairly light on this one. We're happy to go deeper on that side. We've got a couple sessions coming up that I'll talk about in a minute that do go deeper on that side. And if you've got suggestions for other sessions, we cover lots of different topics in these webinars. Happy to entertain those thoughts there. Now, if you want to try this out, you can't try the committee side that I was showing you, but we do have our Extranet User Manager demo portal up and available. So if I come over to which of my many tabs here, sorry. This URL is publicly available, and we have a bunch of public groups that you can request to join and sign in and go through the whole onboarding experience. If you want to see the Power BI stuff, check out a SharePoint communication site. We even have e-commerce support in there, approvals. We're doing some work with Microsoft to get the Yammer stuff working. They still have a few challenges on their side, so that's still a work in progress. But feel free to try this out and experience it from an end user's perspective. What you can also do, though, if you're interested, schedule some time to talk about your scenario with us. And if you're interested, we can actually set up a committee in our EOM demo portal and make you an owner of that committee. So that'll give you access not just to the demo portal itself, but also to the EOM admin behind that, because we have a rich delegation model there. You'd have access just to your committee group that we create for you. You can invite people in. You can create meetings, you can upload documents, you can use it as a committee owner would use it. So if you're interested in that, let us know. There's some steps we need to do sort of manually on our side to set that up, but we're happy to do that for you. On the upcoming events side, so end of this month, we're doing this is more on the Envision IT side of the business, which is our sister company, integrating your line of business systems with Microsoft 365. Like I mentioned on the Electricity Canada side, Salesforce, Dynamics CRM, SAP, all these different enterprise systems, things like Microsoft Logic apps we use pretty extensively to build out workflows and integrations as part of that. So I'm going to be diving deeper into that topic there. And then more on the guest side and getting a little deeper technically, Azure B2B is the business to business, the guest features of Azure Active Directory. So talking more about that, some best practices on that. We've actually got some open source tools we're releasing on that side. That report that I was showing you that showed the sign-ins and the guests and external users and groups that they belong to, we're actually going to be open sourcing that out so people could run that without buying our product, try to look at the Power BI side of things and get an understanding of how guests are being leveraged in their tenant today and what are some of the best practices, even things like common gotchas, what are issues that cause issues with sign-ins or failures or things like that, and how do you mitigate that as part of that. From a wrap-up point of view, just a couple of points here. I hope you've gotten the sense through this that Microsoft 365 is a great platform to manage your boards and committees. The shameless plug is that Extranet User Manager makes it easy for everyone. It can be a little overwhelming natively in Microsoft 365, particularly for people that aren't familiar with it. And what our product does is just makes it simple to delegate that out to the business owners to manage and out to the committee members to participate with. There does need to be a certain scale. We were talking about sort of 10K USD annual operating costs plus some initial installation costs. So obviously, if you have one board with a dozen members on it, unless you really want a simplified experience for them, this may be too much for you from that point of view. But as you get into multiple councils and committees and lots of members, definitely justifies the investment from that point of view. And can't stress enough the delegation concept. That's something that's really important to us. That we don't want IT to be the gatekeepers here. We want the business owners to manage things, even the external parties, like I was talking about with municipal benchmarking, where they delegate out to their member municipalities, and those municipalities decide who comes into their portal as part of that. And don't forget, security is important. I mean, cyber attacks are on the rise. Things are getting crazy out there from that point of view. So, part of that later in June session, we'll be talking about security and how do you properly set up your Azure Active Directory with Microsoft and fully leverage the amazing set of tools that Microsoft has on that side, which aren't all there by default. There's things that you need to do. So, if that's something that keeps you up at night, by all means, tune into that session from there. I think that's my last slide there. So I'll look back at the questions, see if we got any final ones, Logan, that we want to talk about.
No, I think we're good.
Awesome. Well, I will give everybody 6 minutes back. The timing worked out well from that point of view. Thanks, everybody, and have a great rest of your day.